Hey everybody, it's Tony the abstractionist. My hair is in a bun. It's not gone. It's just in a bun. There we go, in the back. Cause I know there's gonna be something like, what the fuck? Okay, anyway. And even if I'm looking at the video, I'm like, what the fuck? So anyway, so I decided to do a video kind of like more about my own chart. When is it not about me, right? Leo moon things. But anyway, I decided to do a video about having a Cancer Mercury or a water Mercury, and it's because I get frustrated with this placement like a lot. So my Mercury is in Cancer. It's not necessarily conjunct, but it's in the same sign, right? So it's in Cancer, it's opposed Uranus, and Uranus is conjunct Neptune. So I have a watery Mercury that is opposed watery planet, but it's in Capricorn, so it makes it a little bit more realistic, and that is also conjunct like a more airy element, airy planet, which is also in Capricorn. So it's kind of like weird to think about. So I'm just like, so my frustration, pet peeve with a water Mercury is that like you could say something plain as fucking day and people like don't get what you're talking about. Like, so in my mind, the best example is like the sky is blue, and people would be like, you said the sky is turquoise, and it's like, well, isn't that blue? Like, I'm not understanding like what it is. Or like you'll say that the sky is blue, they'll interpret it as turquoise, and then they'll tell you that you like lied, or they'll come up with something altogether different than what you said. Like, the sky is blue, yeah, yellow is like a really great color for the sky, and it's like, that's not what I didn't say that at all. I said the sky is blue. And what I get from people is that I have to like put my placement in perspective, because I know that my placement can kind of mean that like I have very abrupt thoughts about things, and also I have very like, I guess it's a certain kind of thinking that like doesn't necessarily fit together rationally in other people's minds. So I'm like very aware of that. I'm very aware that my perspectives in general are very like out there and weird, and that I put together subjects that don't necessarily go together in the more logical sense. But I kind of challenge why they don't go together. Like, if everything is connected, right? We say everything is connected, but in a literal sense, everyone here is connected on Earth by virtue of just being on Earth. That's our connection. It's not necessarily race, it's not necessarily location. It's, we're literally on planet Earth. Therefore, we are all connected. We are all connected. And so, if we're all connected, I don't understand why specific things are so walled up that they can't be like found relatable amongst other things, even if those things are very different, right? That, you know, like, I'm not, this goes into topics of diversity, but I'm not like hardcore like diversity in the way that we talk about it. I think a little bit of segregation between things is perfectly fine, particularly if you're not fully actualized. You being underdeveloped and then trying to like ally with other things can really spell disaster for those relationships if you're not willing to accept real responsibility for being there and being whatever, you know, what, playing your part of the relationship is what I'm saying. If you're not really willing to do that work with yourself to then do the work of being in a relationship with other people, then shit falls apart, and there's no point of having diverse groups of thought or people or whatever. You know, the world kind of works when things kind of work in their roles. And so there's that. But this idea that like people in different parts of the world speak different languages, blah blah blah, like can't have like a mutual, like, I don't know, connectivity, or that industries, this is a common thing, people in their entire life can't jump careers because they don't seem like the skills from one job will carry over. Like, I don't know, as a water Mercury, I just don't understand how like connectivity, I just don't understand the lack of connectivity between things sometimes. And I don't know, it's kind of almost like to have a water Mercury, it's kind of like you have to suspend connectivity to like then have it, or like you have to suspend your belief, your disbelief of connectivity in order to see like solutions that sit outside of those defined lines. And that's how I end up having the perspectives that I have. I don't think that because you read tarot, for some reason you can't be like an engineer, or for some reason you can't learn how to build sailboats, or for some reason you can't be able to like cook a certain dish, or you can't be able to, like, I don't see limitations. And I think water Mercuries, they're like really powerful in that way because limits don't really exist, I think. And they can kind of get into trouble because like on the more negative end, it could be things that literally like are not there, that you're reading into very deeply, that don't exist, and you can project whatever negative emotions, negative vibrations that you have on other people. And on the positive sense, you can see things like into the future. You're very forward thinking, forward moving. You can see solutions where people may not be able to. And so like it's a bit, to me, it's like a benefit of having a water Mercury. Another thing is I feel that people, because of the nebulous nature of water, you know, like it needs to have a container in order for it to have a form. I think people don't, it, like that formlessness is kind of like a void type thing. And I think people try to assign a role to water Mercuries more than any other Mercury. I think people try to assign a role to water Mercuries because to define a role means then you can play out a certain energy or a certain pathway, right? And it's very hard to define that. So I find that people project more into water Mercuries more than anything. Or the idea of projection in general is something that water Mercuries have to like deal with. You know what I'm saying? I also find that people don't necessarily trust water Mercuries, and water Mercuries don't necessarily trust themselves or the people or what they're saying. So I think it would be really easy to fall into spaces like cults, mind control, brainwashing, groupthink, because the diffusion between the parties involved is so like widespread, that it really becomes an issue. And so yeah, I think that a lot of people also get very confused by water Mercuries because I kind of feel like water, I don't know, I just feel like knowing my Mercury just allows me to like be okay with my thought processes and how I think. But I find that water Mercuries probably get pigeonholed into being like, I don't know, I just get pigeonholed into not understanding the world in very concrete terms, and not accepting the world in very concrete terms, which could be a weakness. But that that may be more of society's desire to keep things a certain way and to place people in certain roles so that we can fulfill those functions, like I said. But the thing about the Mercury is that those things shift like a lot. And I'm very rigid in the way I think about certain topics and issues, in the political sense and blah, blah, blah. But you can have second, third, fourth, fifth winds. And what I mean by that is you can regenerate yourself. You can put yourself in this direction, and then one day you go off into another direction. And the flexibility of water, changing states of matter, changing courses on the physical plane, taking and absorbing the energy around it, cleansing the energy around it. These are very interesting properties, aspects that frankly may scare people. And I do think there's a lot of fear with the water. I think there's a lot of fear of water placements in general, of being lost within those things, of not having a definition, of not having a border, of not having a slot, of drifting aimlessly, projected onto the people who have that placement, or projected by that person onto that, and perhaps that projection outward is feeling like there isn't a particular space for your Mercury to express itself in a very, I don't say proper way, but in a way that that feedback comes back in a more positive sense. I think water Mercuries, because I'm surrounded by a bunch of shit, would do well to be in spaces where it's very clean. And what I mean by that is minimalist. Very clean palettes, clean spaces, organized spaces, because you get to ping off of fewer things, but to develop your sense of understanding, you may need fewer things to begin with to ping off of, so that the information that you get is a lot truer, is a lot stronger, is a lot more sound with what you're asking. And yeah, so that's basically what I wanted to say. I didn't really have any defined thing that I wanted to talk about outside of my frustrations at the beginning, but I do think I'll be doing more astrological work in the future. I really have to get my file that I wrote and has subsequently lost on my other computer. I have to rebuild that, because that was a lot of stuff. I had started with Pluto, and I just literally typed in all my thoughts about Pluto and Aries, Pluto and this, and Pluto and that, and I literally went through that. And it's kind of funny because I never find books astrologically about just straight Pluto, just straight Saturn, just straight Jupiter. And I wonder why, because I feel like we could write at least a 50-page book about Saturn alone in astrological terms, right? In aspects, in signs, in whatever. The essence of what it means to be Jupiterian, the essence of what it means. I feel like we could do that. Why aren't there any books in that? Why aren't there any books specifically targeting that? Maybe I'm not looking in the right places, but yeah, usually when there are some books, it's usually about Saturn, a lot of books about the moon, but you never have a book that's 100 pages just dealing with Mars. I think we need to deep dive a little bit. So that's my perspectives on that. Thank you for watching, and I'll talk to you later. Bye.